Greenland, basically, their defense is 2 dog sleds. Do you know that? You know what their defense is? 2 dog sleds.
Trump officially just declared he doesn't just want Greenland, he wants Denmark too, and geopolitical experts are framing this as the most catastrophic escalation between NATO allies in the alliance's 75-year history. This report just came in, so stick around to find out the truth and hit that like button to make others aware of the situation. Consider subscribing while you're at it to stay updated daily. We do not spread fake news like other outlets do, so let's dive straight into Trump's latest step towards world domination.
Tensions between Denmark and the US continue to deepen. The flashpoint remains Greenland, with Denmark issuing its strongest warning yet. It says its soldiers would open fire immediately if any foreign force tried to invade Danish territory, including Greenland. The warning comes as Donald Trump continues to push the idea of acquiring the Arctic territory.
For weeks, tensions over Greenland have been building behind closed diplomatic doors, but the situation just exploded into open crisis. U.S. military forces are already positioning in Greenland. Marines, naval assets, air support, establishing control without Danish consent. And now Trump has stated explicitly that Denmark is next. It's honestly hard to believe we're witnessing the United States threatening to invade a founding NATO member. This isn't just about Arctic territory or strategic positioning. We're talking about a fundamental collapse of alliance structures, the potential for armed conflict between democratic allies, and a pattern of American territorial expansion that could trigger the most devastating geopolitical crisis since World War II. And trust me, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's panicked emergency meetings tell you everything about how unprepared Denmark is for what's unfolding. The stakes have never been higher, the threat more immediate, and Denmark's options more catastrophically limited. Let me fill you in on how we got from diplomatic dispute to invasion threat and why this represents an unprecedented crisis for NATO and global order. Here's the scoop on the Greenland situation. For months, the United States has been escalating pressure on Denmark regarding Greenland's status. The strategic justification is clear. Greenland sits between North America and Europe, hosts critical missile defense systems at Thule Air Base, and controls access to emerging Arctic shipping routes that could redefine global commerce. According to Pentagon assessments, control over Greenland is essential for countering Russian and Chinese Arctic expansion and maintaining Western dominance in the region. Could World War III spark out? We'll explain why or why not soon. Stick around. Denmark has sovereignty over Greenland, though Greenland maintains substantial autonomy under its own government, led by Premier Mute Borup Egede. But according to US intelligence reports, diplomatic negotiations reached an impasse. Denmark refused to consider selling or ceding Greenland. Greenland's government resisted American pressure while simultaneously pushing for independence from Denmark. The situation created a stalemate that, from Washington's perspective, threatened to allow adversaries to establish irreversible positions in the Arctic. According to military sources, the decision was made to act unilaterally. Over the past 72 hours, U.S. forces have been deploying to Greenland, Marine expeditionary units, naval vessels, air support including fighter squadrons and transport wings. The forces are described as sufficient to establish and maintain territorial control against any potential resistance. But what transformed this from a Greenland crisis into a Denmark crisis is Trump's statement that Denmark itself is next. According to reports from the White House, Trump has framed Denmark's resistance to American control of Greenland as obstruction that Denmark will pay for directly. The implication is clear. Once Greenland is secured, U.S. forces will move on Denmark proper. According to defense intelligence sources, the Greenland operation is already well underway, moving from deployment to occupation with speed designed to prevent diplomatic intervention. Reports from Greenland describe U.S. Marines establishing positions at key infrastructure points. Thule Air Base, already under American operation, has been reinforced with thousands of additional personnel. According to satellite imagery analyzed by military experts, naval vessels including amphibious assault ships are positioned off Greenland's coast. Air assets including fighter jets and transport aircraft are conducting continuous operations. The messaging to Greenlandic authorities has been described as a combination of economic incentives and implicit threats. According to sources familiar with the communications, U.S. officials are offering massive infrastructure investment, economic development packages, and security guarantees in exchange for cooperation with American administration. The alternative left unstated but clear: resistance would be futile and costly. Talk about unprecedented military logistics. According to operational assessments, the U.S. has deployed assets capable of sustaining long-term occupation, not just temporary presence. Supply chains are being established. Communications infrastructure is being installed. The construction suggests permanent American control is the objective, not negotiated settlement. Danish military presence in Greenland is minimal. A few hundred personnel with limited equipment designed for sovereignty patrol, not territorial defense. According to military analysts, Denmark has no capacity to contest American deployment, even if it decided to try. The asymmetry is total and overwhelming. Reports from Copenhagen describe emergency cabinet meetings where Danish officials confront the reality that their sovereignty over Greenland is being eliminated in real time without any ability to prevent it. According to sources within the Danish government, the panic is driven by the recognition that international law, NATO protocols, and diplomatic norms are proving meaningless when a superpower decides they don't apply. Most significantly, the operation is being conducted without Danish consent and arguably without Greenlandic consent in any meaningful democratic sense. This isn't negotiated transfer of sovereignty. This is military occupation framed as security operation. The parallels to historical invasions are unavoidable and deeply disturbing to observers worldwide. Now, this isn't the first time Trump has openly threatened territorial action against sovereign nations. The pattern that's emerging is what's truly terrifying about this moment. Venezuela. According to reports, Trump has made explicit threats regarding American intervention in Venezuela, citing security concerns and regional instability. The rhetoric has escalated from diplomatic pressure to suggestions of military options being on the table. Iran. Threats of military action have been constant, with Trump suggesting that regime change or territorial strikes could be necessary to counter what he describes as Iranian aggression and nuclear ambitions. Iraq. Despite Iraq being a supposed ally and host to American forces, Trump has made statements suggesting that U.S. control over Iraqi oil fields or expanded American presence would be justified as payment for security provision. Greenland and Denmark, now the focus of active military operations and explicit invasion threats. We've spotted this pattern throughout Trump's approach to international relations. Just think about the evolution. What started as transactional foreign policy rhetoric has escalated to actual military deployments and territorial claims. The progression reveals something fundamental about Trump's worldview and willingness to use American military power to reshape borders. This pattern reveals something terrifying: the possibility that Trump views American military supremacy as justification for territorial expansion on a scale not seen since World War II-era imperialism. According to geopolitical analysts, if the Greenland and Denmark operations succeed without sufficient international pushback, they could embolden further territorial assertions against other nations Trump views as weak or strategically valuable. The question being asked in capitals worldwide is whether this represents opportunistic power plays against isolated targets or the beginning of a systematic American territorial expansion that could destabilize the entire international order. The answer will determine whether we're witnessing aberrant aggression or the opening moves of a campaign for what some are calling American world domination. So here's where it gets really devastating for Denmark. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen faces what might be the most impossible position any democratic leader has confronted in the post-Cold War era. The situation breaks down starkly into options that are all catastrophic. First, military resistance. Denmark's entire military consists of roughly 15,000 active personnel with limited heavy equipment and no capacity for power projection. According to defense experts, Denmark couldn't hold Greenland against American forces for more than hours, if that. Any attempt at armed resistance against the United States would be militarily futile and politically suicidal. It would shatter NATO, isolate Denmark internationally, and potentially leave Denmark vulnerable to Russian pressure without alliance protection. Second, diplomatic escalation. Denmark could appeal to NATO, the United Nations, the European Union, and international courts. But according to diplomatic analysts, the responses would range from ineffective to non-existent. NATO members depend on American security guarantees and won't confront Washington over Arctic territory. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by American veto power. The EU lacks military capacity to intervene. International courts would take years to rule, and have no enforcement mechanisms against a superpower. Third, capitulation. Denmark could formally cede Greenland and hope that satisfies American demands, preventing the threatened invasion of Denmark proper. But according to political analysts in Copenhagen, such surrender would trigger government collapse, mass protests, and potentially constitutional crisis. The Danish population would view it as betrayal. Denmark's international standing would be destroyed, and there's no guarantee that compliance would prevent further American demands. According to sources within the Danish government, Frederiksen is conducting emergency consultations with coalition partners, opposition leaders, military commanders, and foreign allies trying to find any path forward that doesn't end in disaster. The reports describe a leader in government in absolute panic, recognizing that every hour that passes sees American control in Greenland becoming more entrenched and Denmark's options becoming more limited. Most significantly, Trump's statement that Denmark is next transforms this from a Greenland crisis into an existential threat to Danish sovereignty. According to military assessments, if the United States decided to invade Denmark proper, Danish forces couldn't mount meaningful resistance. Copenhagen could be occupied within days. The entire country could be under American military control before international response could organize. The nightmare scenario that Danish officials are confronting is that resistance triggers invasion, but capitulation only delays it while establishing precedent that American territorial demands must be met. Now, here's the kicker. The U.S. actions against Denmark and Greenland are causing geopolitical shockwaves with implications that extend far beyond the Arctic, threatening to fundamentally reshape global power dynamics. NATO allies are reacting with what sources describe as shocked paralysis. According to diplomatic reports, European governments are caught between horror at seeing a member state threatened with invasion and terror about confronting the United States when their own security depends on American commitment. The United Kingdom, France, and Germany have issued statements calling for restraint and dialogue, but according to analysts, the weakness of the language reveals their unwillingness to actually oppose American actions. Each nation is calculating whether defending Denmark is worth risking their own security relationships with Washington. Smaller NATO members, particularly those bordering Russia like the Baltic states and Poland, are watching with particular alarm. According to security experts, if the United States can invade Denmark with impunity, what prevents Russia from arguing that similar strategic necessity justifies operations against its neighbors? The precedent being set could make NATO's Article 5 collective defense guarantee meaningless. Russia's reaction is being closely monitored. According to intelligence assessments, Moscow views the situation as validation of Russian territorial assertions elsewhere. If America can claim Greenland and threaten Denmark based on strategic necessity, Russia could use identical logic for Ukraine, Moldova, or the Baltics. Reports indicate Russian state media is framing American actions as proof of Western hypocrisy on sovereignty and international law. China is watching with enormous strategic interest. According to analysts tracking Chinese foreign policy, Beijing sees American territorial expansion as the final collapse of the post-World War II international order. If might makes right and strategic importance justifies territorial seizure, China could apply identical reasoning to Taiwan, the South China Sea, or disputed border regions. The American precedent could embolden Chinese assertiveness on a massive scale. Global markets are reacting with volatility, reflecting profound uncertainty about international stability. According to economic analysts, if major powers can simply take territory from smaller nations based on strategic calculations, the entire framework of international trade, investment, and economic cooperation faces existential questions about viability and security. According to strategic forecasters, if the Greenland and Denmark operations complete successfully, the United States will have achieved total Arctic dominance. American military presence would extend from Alaska through Greenland to Europe, creating an unbroken chain of control over the Arctic Ocean, northern Atlantic shipping lanes, and early warning systems covering both Russia and transatlantic approaches. The strategic advantage would be enormous, but the cost in terms of alliance cohesion, international legitimacy, and risk of great power conflict could be catastrophic. Let's break down what this could trigger, because the risks extend beyond regional crisis to potential global conflict. First, the NATO fracture. If the alliance cannot resolve this crisis, if member states stand by while the United States invades Denmark, NATO's credibility as a defensive alliance collapses. According to security experts, that collapse would embolden adversaries, terrify allies, and potentially trigger arms races and realignment as nations scramble to secure their own survival without reliable alliance structures. Second, the precedent for territorial revision. If America succeeds in taking Greenland and Denmark through military force justified by strategic necessity, other major powers will apply identical logic. According to geopolitical analysts, Russia could move on Ukraine, Moldova, or the Baltics. China could escalate on Taiwan or maritime disputes. The international system based on sovereignty and territorial integrity would be replaced by naked power competition. Third, the cascade of conflict. Once major powers start revising borders by force, the potential for miscalculation, escalation, and wider war increases exponentially. According to conflict forecasters, scenarios that seemed impossible, NATO-Russia war, US-China conflict, multi-front great power confrontations, become increasingly plausible as restraints collapse and strategic paranoia intensifies. The question of whether this leads to World War III depends on whether other major powers accept American territorial expansion or respond with their own assertions that trigger confrontations. According to historians studying paths to previous world wars, the current situation bears disturbing similarities to pre-1914 and pre-1939 conditions, rising powers challenging existing order, alliance commitments creating entanglement risks, and leaders willing to use force to achieve strategic objectives. Most significantly, the nuclear dimension adds catastrophic risk. All the major powers involved, the United States, Russia, China, NATO members, possess nuclear weapons. According to nuclear strategists, territorial conflicts between nuclear powers create escalation ladders that could lead to unthinkable outcomes if crises spiral beyond control. So here's the deal. President Trump has launched operations to seize Greenland and is threatening to invade Denmark itself, creating the most severe NATO crisis in history and potentially triggering geopolitical consequences that could lead to World War III. This isn't just about two territories in the Arctic. It's about whether the international system based on sovereignty, alliances, and international law can survive when superpowers decide strategic interests justify military expansion regardless of legal or diplomatic constraints. Denmark is in absolute panic because Prime Minister Frederiksen has no good options. Military resistance is futile, diplomatic appeals are ineffective, and capitulation might only delay invasion while establishing precedent that American demands must be met. The pattern of Trump threatening multiple nations, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, Greenland, Denmark, raises terrifying questions about whether this represents isolated opportunism or systematic territorial expansion aimed at American global dominance through military force. So, watch how NATO responds as the alliance faces potential collapse over whether members will defend Denmark or acquiesce to American actions. Watch whether Russia and China use this precedent to justify their own territorial assertions. Watch whether international institutions can constrain great power aggression, or whether we're witnessing the return of imperial competition that destroyed the world twice in the 20th century. The stakes couldn't be higher, the danger more immediate, or the consequences more potentially catastrophic. We're witnessing either a crisis that will be resolved through mechanisms that preserve international order, or the opening chapter of a geopolitical transformation that could plunge the world into the most devastating conflict in human history.